Welcome to this evening's program, LGBTQ Children in Orthodox Day Schools. This joint venture program of Porat and Eshel follows our January 2023 program, Welcoming Everyone to Shul, Why We Should Ensure Our Shuls Embrace LGBTQ plus Jews. If you have not had a chance to watch that program, you can do so at poratonline.org/events. Before continuing, I want to thank tonight's many co-sponsors, including the International Rabbinic Fellowship, JOFA, JQY, Uri L'Tzedek, Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, and Yeshivat Maharat. I'll also note that if you would like closed captioning, that is available this evening. Just go down to the bottom of your page and potentially click on closed captioning or more, and then you should be able to find closed captioning. Given the settlement earlier this year of litigation regarding an LGBTQ club at Yeshiva University, and YU's decision to revoke its approval of the club last week, our topic is extremely timely. Today you will hear from students and their parents regarding their experiences with Orthodox high schools. Our goal is not to shame any institution, so our speakers will not be mentioning institutions by name. Instead, our goal is to educate and inform, allowing you to hear how the decisions made by educators and institutions affect LGBTQ students. In thinking about this issue, a verse from this past week's Torah portion comes to mind. In Emor, we are told in Vayikra Kafbet Pasuk Tezvav, V'lo yichalalu es kodshei b'nei Yisrael. Do not profane the holy things of the children of Israel. The 19th century rabbi Chaim Sofer, in his commentary, the Divrei Shari Chaim, suggests that this prohibition applies even today, warning us not to disrespect holy people. In particular, Rabbi Sofer notes that the verse warns teachers and rabbis to be careful to avoid creating a Chilul Hashem by failing to show proper respect to other teachers and rabbis. While Rabbi Sofer was concerned about the treatment of religious communal leaders, I suggest that this guidance also applies to how teachers and rabbis treat our children, as our children are among the holiest things we have in our community. Indeed, the Gemara in Shabbat, Daf Kuf Yud Ted Amud Bet, notes that the world only exists because of the Torah of our school children. Hopefully, by listening to the needs and feelings of our children, as will be shared this evening, we can live up to the high standard of showing proper respect to all the holy members of our community. On that note, I want to introduce Dr. Jeremy Novich. Dr. Novich is the psychology at JQY, Jewish Queer Youth, an organization that supports and empowers LGBTQ youth ages 13 to 23 from Orthodox, Hasidic, and Sephardic homes. Thank you, Dr. Novich, for serving as our moderator this evening. I'll turn it over to you to facilitate the introduction of tonight's panelists.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Schwartz, and thank you to Porat, Eshel, and all of the co-sponsoring organizations for hosting the event and for having me moderate tonight. Before we get into content, we're going to do a few items of housekeeping. We'll be having 5 panelists join me this evening. We're going to speak for about 60 minutes. We'll then take a break for some announcements, and then we're going to come back for a Q&A. Yes, I said Q&A. So at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A function. You could click it and submit your questions. There's even a checkbox to do so anonymously if you'd like. So please use the Q&A function often and use it well, in good health, whatever the word is. Okay, so we would now like to welcome our panelists for the evening, and we will be doing introductions with them. So let's do our introductions. All right, so we're going to do, let's say your name, your pronouns if you'd like, and what brings you to the panel, and then maybe a fun fact. But because, as I do in any group session as a psychologist, I always like to do the intro myself. Otherwise, why am I asking you to do it? So my name is Jeremy Novich. I use he, him pronouns. What brings me to the panel is I'm the clinical director at JQY. Um, and a fun fact about me. Um, is I have a really cute dog. She's a miniature pinscher, but everybody thinks she's a Chihuahua. So I'm always having to correct people on the street, or listen to them mess it up. But she doesn't get upset about it. And that's my intro. Why don't we go in the order on my screen? Robin, would you like to go?
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Robin Siegel. I am a parent at Eshel, which is an organization for LGBTQ people. And then they have a separate division for parents, and I've been involved with that for the past couple of years. A fun fact about me, well, as you can see probably from behind me, I am a huge Broadway fan. Some would call it a little bit obsessed, but that's my fun fact.
Thank you, Robin. Yaakov.
Hi, I'm Yaakov. I am here because I am just about to graduate from a Jewish day school. I am transgender, so I'm part of the LGBTQ community. I've worked a little bit with JQI and Eshel, but I'm still new. And fun fact about me is I've never done anything like this before. I've never been on a panel before. I've never really spoken publicly before, so this is very new for me.
Awesome. Thanks, Yaakov. Well, don't worry. You have support here, at least one person. Eve, I think you're pretty supportive of Yaakov. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Yaakov's mom, and I'm also been an Eshel parent for a few years. It's a really phenomenal lifeline for parents, as well as I assume for everyone else too. But as a parent, I get that part of it. And I had to think carefully about the fun facts so that I didn't choose something that would embarrass Yaakov too much. So I'm going to go with we love movies in our house. So we do a lot of movies.
Awesome. Thanks, Eve. Rory?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rory Picker-Niece. I probably come here with a few different hats. I'm a graduate of Yeshivat Maharat. I work professionally for the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, and I am an Eshel parent. I'm the parent of a 14-year-old trans son, and have done a lot of advocacy around all of that. And so I think my fun fact is that for a variety of reasons, the first time that I was actually able to ever take my son to Pride was actually Pride at the White House.
Awesome. Wow. Sounds like a fun fact. Um, Ben.
That is a really cool fun fact. Hi everyone, my name is Ben. I have grown up in North Jersey. I went to day school really from infancy up until 12th grade. I'm currently a second year student or just finished my second year at the University of Pennsylvania where I'm studying chemistry and English. I came out when I was in 11th grade, and since then I've been super involved with both Eshel and JQI. Both my parents are involved in Eshel. Super happy to be here. My fun fact is that I also have a super cute dog. He's actually sitting right next to me on the floor, taking a nap. You might hear him just moving around during the discussion, but really happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. We can't do this is like an initial panel. We can't do like a doggy show, but I wish I could. I usually do during meetings, but whatever. I guess I can't do it during panels. Okay, so why don't we get started on our conversation about Jewish day schools, LGBTQ students in Orthodox day schools. Maybe we could start with coming out. What was, in the general sense, what was coming out like for you or your child if you're a parent here? And whoever wants to start can start.
I'll start, I guess.
Go for it, Yaakov.
I I can't, talk about every single detail in the short amount of time we have, but I think honestly that's the biggest part is I don't think people realize how many phases of coming out you have to go through before it's over, and it's never really over, you know? Even if you're completely out, you still have to constantly think, okay, am I going to tell this person or not? How much do they know? And you have to come out to yourself. You have to come out to your friends, to your parents, to your community. For me, I think many people, I spent a couple years questioning just privately. I spent some time questioning with some of my friends. I actually did come out to my parents pretty early. And that is something that I'm really grateful for because a lot of people can't go on that journey with their parents because they're afraid to, and that's really sad. And then I also was really lucky to have some communities where I was able to be out. Not at school, but I had a camp where I was out, which was amazing, and I had I had a few different programs and organizations here and there where I was out, even if they weren't specifically LGBTQ organizations. Which I think another thing that is very important to understand is that especially if you're someone who is trans and not just gay, you don't know what you're getting yourself into until you experience it. And if you go from just being completely in the closet to being completely out, it's almost impossible, and it's not really a step that's reasonable for anyone to take. So for me, it was very important to have um different communities I was coming out to at a time, and then the big sort of the big final moment when I came out to my school, I had already talked to the administration. They knew beforehand. And I planned with them. We talked about when it would happen. And I came out this summer before my senior year. I was gonna wait till after high school, and then I realized I just couldn't wait anymore. Um, which people always ask me, why don't you just wait? It's because I I couldn't keep living that way. It was impossible. Um, there was a certain point when I couldn't keep living one way in school and another way out of school. It was starting to get to the point where if I didn't come out, I was going to be outed soon anyway, and I wanted to have control over it. I wanted it to be with my words. And I sent a text to the grade. It was actually very well received. I want to let someone else speak. I can share a little bit more details about that text. But that was my story. And that's the story that I think like a lot of people in my
Mm.
position have gone through.
Thanks, Yakov. Ben, can you talk a little bit about kind of what Yakov mentioned, feeling the need to come out because he was going to get outed anyway, going back and forth, school and home. What was your experience like? And then we'll get to the parents.
Sure. So my experience was pretty unlike Yakov's. I came out to my parents first when I was in 10th grade, actually like the night after Yom Kippur during Nil. I was telling myself, the things I was gonna do better that year. I was gonna have more covenant on my davening. I was gonna say less lashon hara. And then like a voice from the back of my mind was like, and I'm gonna come out by the end of the year. And then another voice was like, why don't you just come out tonight? So I did, which was super hard. And my parents were definitely surprised, but they were just beyond supportive, better than I ever could have imagined. And the three of us really decided, and we all agreed upon this, that we weren't really going to tell anyone else. I was very fine being in the closet with just my parents knowing. It was really all that I desired at that point. My parents really feared that, I'd had some friends that had said some homophobic things. I grew up in like a pretty conservative, lowercase c community, and they were really just nervous that I and my family was going to receive a lot of hate. And that was fine until about like a year later when, one day I woke up and I just decided I was ready to tell my friends. And I said that to my parents, and they were really they gave me a hard time. They were like, Ben, you have friends who have said some pretty homophobic things. You live in a very conservative community. This could be really, really, really harmful for you. And I was before 11th grade in that moment. So, you're only 16, like, you're not, I mean, you're emotionally strong. You come out to us, but we don't know if you're ready to deal with all the potential blowback that can come with it. And I persisted, and it was a conversation that went on for 5 to 6 months, and eventually, I became so depressed and so anxious that I said, I really just I need to come out. Like I need to live as my most authentic self. I feel like I'm lying to my friends. I'm lying to myself. I'm not my real self in the closet. So I started to tell my siblings. My siblings didn't even know at that point. Um, and their response was, Ben, we love you, but please, please just don't tell anyone yet. We're really not ready. And my parents were like, all right, Ben, let's just take it slow. And at that point, I was like on the verge of telling my friends, family comes first. I was to tell my siblings and my grandparents and my extended family before my friends. But I was really like, no, like I'm on the verge, like I'm so close to telling my friends, like I need to do this. And they were like, all right, you're right. Um, and one Sunday, I sat down at my desk in my room and called my 10 closest friends and told them. And most were really, really, really surprised, but surprisingly supportive. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Hmm. Thanks, Ben. So I'm hearing some real kind of from you and Yaakov, some kind of real urgency to come out. It's really hard to just be secretive and not be able to tell people and to hide this thing from yourself. Eve, I think you had something to say before. You want to chime in and be our first parent to kick
Please,
us off?
thank you. Yeah, just because it's one thing that's been so important throughout this entire process is that as I remember the very first step of Yaakov coming out to me was the day I said, you're just so much happier since you started high school. And he was like, can we talk about that? And that's what eventually led to the conversation. And the reason I say that is that we're going to be sharing a longer story throughout the panel tonight about what happened with Yaakov. But part of why I've been a very persistent advocate on his behalf is that I've just seen such a dramatic change within him that I don't think could be seen by someone who hasn't spent a lifetime with him. So I guess as a witness, as a very up close witness to somebody becoming themselves, I see what coming out can do in that sense, and that it's and I've seen how the weight of being at peace with himself is way more important than the weight of like any blowback that's going to come externally. So again, I've seen that. It makes me believe in what I'm seeing. It makes me understand things that I didn't understand just having them explained to me, like understanding what it meant to be trans and so forth. I only understand by watching at an emotional level.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Um,
Can I can I add?
Go for it. Go for it. And then
I
we'll come to Rory.
Yes, sorry.
No, go for it.
I just want to add that in general, but I know this from my own experience, um, coming out is not just being public. It's not just telling people about yourself. Because when you're in the closet, it doesn't just mean you have to, oh, like people don't know this one. Like there are a lot of things people don't know about me, right? I share some things, I don't share other things. But when you have to, when you're holding something like a sexuality or a gender identity, when you're keeping that hidden, you're holding it in the closet, that means that you have to put in so much energy every single day to hide a fundamental part of yourself. It changes how you act, it changes how you speak, it changes the friends that you have. And that's not just sharing something or keeping it private. That is choosing to live with the lifestyle that would make you happy or choosing to wait for that lifestyle. And it's, I think, just a lot more, has a lot more weight than it is really given recognition for.
Mm. Very true, Yaakov. Thank you. About Rory.
So our story is pretty different. I'm so grateful, Ben and Yaakov, for all that you shared. When my son came out, he was, I mentioned I have a 14-year-old. He was 7. He had just turned 7 when he started his process of socially transitioning. And he came out to his teacher first, not even knowing. He wouldn't have used that language of coming out. He didn't even know. We got an email from his first grade teacher saying, your child just announced to everybody that this is his new name and that he wants to be treated like a boy. What do you want me to do? And we just said, I don't know. Let's see where this goes. And we had a series of conversations, and he didn't have the language of trans or any of that. I mean, this so similarly. I mean, it's still a much longer process. But for me, what was so, when I think back on that, I just think about the ways in which there were people around him who took that seriously. I think how easy it could have been for a teacher to just say, oh, you're just being silly right now, or oh, is it upside down day, or something, right? Because and that could have just shut him down for years. And somehow, though, the teacher said, like, there's something here, and he knew this. He knew he could say this because another kid in the class had changed his name, nothing to do with gender, because he liked a character in a book. But the teacher had reinforced and said, we call people by the names they want to be called. And so that already signaled, oh, you're allowed to choose a name. And when he realized that there was a name, he saw a name, it was actually his initials at first. He saw a name that just really spoke to him. And he realized, like, this is who I am. And so it's been a much bigger journey in terms of what that's what that's meant and the implications of it. But he actually had, I think, in some ways, a much easier time because he didn't understand the weight of everything else that was going on. But he realized a truth about himself. He was able to name it, and there were enough people around him who recognized that there was something in what he was saying to not dismiss him outright, and to be able to help support him and foster him. And so we're incredibly grateful for that journey.
Mm. I really appreciate, particularly, not only did the teacher take him seriously, but also didn't catastrophize. Like, it was both serious and also not an emergency, which is kind of like a nice balance and helpful position to come from. Robin.
So my story is also a bit of an anomaly. My son, I have a gay son who is almost 22, and I thank God every day that we had him in the perfect school that he should be in order to come out safely and authentically. He actually never really, quote unquote, came out. It was kind of something that we, as in family, as in community, kind of just, it wasn't a shock to anyone, I'll put it that way. And we, as in his dad and I, spent a lot of time, I think, trying to prepare ourselves for if this were to happen, what should we do as supportive parents? I happen to also be a licensed social worker, so it just kind of comes with the territory of knowing that really all I cared about was my kids' mental health. With that said, I think one of the harder parts was potentially with his siblings. He never really came out with them either. He kind of waited till they asked. And one of them was kind of like, "Oh, you are? Okay, anyway, next." And the other one was also a little bit shocked, which kind of shocked us because we just thought it was an assumed thing. I don't know. Thank God it wasn't really an issue. And I think he probably would say that the same thing. He also is very adamant that he wishes we were at a place in society and in our community where you didn't have to come out. That you just are who you are, and like, why would anyone care who he is or isn't interested in dating or marrying? So I mean, I think he's a couple steps away from where we are now, but I would love to say that would be an ideal situation one day.
Thanks, Robin. I saw some nods from Yaakov and Rabah Rory. Yaakov, you nod, I think, slightly more vigorously. So why don't you share what's behind your nod?
Sure. So I totally agree about not having to come out. Now, of course, as a trans person, that's a little bit impossible. You can't, like, that is going to be a process. You do have to tell people this is my new name, this is what's happening and everything. But in terms of sexuality, I have always thought it was so strange that I know my friend's sexuality, every one of them. Why is that important? And the camp that I go to, where I said was, one of the first places where I was out, people didn't come out. Nothing was assumed. It was just, you were what you were. A few times people came out as straight. And people were like, "Oh, were it really you?" But like, that was more of a joke. And for the most part, it didn't make a difference, right? And I don't understand why it's very strange. It's very strange that sexuality is such an important thing for us to have out there in the public. At the same time, though, as strange as it is very important. And so like, on the one hand, I don't think it should have to have so much weight and people shouldn't have to come out. On the other hand, it does have a lot of weight because society has put a lot of weight on it. And so people do need the resources to be able to come out, because if you don't, then you're holding a lot inside of you. So it's an interesting balance there. But I think coming out is one of the, I even just said it to one of my friends earlier today. Coming out is one of the hardest parts about being part of the LGBTQ community in any way. It's so difficult. And it never gets easier.
Um, as you're talking, um, I'm thinking about, what I say in when we do education is that when people say, well, why do you have to make an issue out of it, right? Like what you're saying, Yaakov, and the answer is when you're in a minority group, it's like a totally different ball game. Of course, if you're straight or cis, you don't feel a need to come out, right? Of course, but if you were part of the queer community, also known in case if you're not knowing what queer means, that's totally cool. Same, we're just substituting LGBTQ, queer, synonyms tonight. Um, like it's a very different experience when you're part of a minority group, right? It's like potentially like asking for a kosher meal or something, or saying you're Jewish when you're on like a tour that's going into a church or something like that. When you're in the minority group, it's a very different feeling of needing to be visible. What about Rory? Do you remember why you? Whoa, hold on, wait, Ben. We're trying to make this organic conversation. Ben.
I really don't mean to interrupt, Rory. I'm so sorry, but I'd like to add on that or maybe qualify that and say that when we're coming out, I don't think we're trying to make an issue at all. Like, I think we're just trying to say who we are and then just leave it at that. I think it's the people who are responding negatively are the ones who are making an issue out of it. I don't think anyone ever comes out with in malice. I don't think that's genuine coming out. Jakob, I would assume, you didn't come out of spite. You came out because you wanted to be who you are. And it's the people, giving us a hard time who are making the real issue.
Jeremy, can I jump in too?
Hold on, wait. I gotta get to Rory. I
Okay.
love that everybody's so energized, and then we're gonna come to you, Robin.
Well, I'm agreeing with what everyone is saying here. I mean, I think just it's so being able to see what it's meant for my kids to live in a world that recognizes that there are these options out there and what it is to just have sometimes really subtle changes in language that I mean have so much of like what's undercutting everything we're talking about. I think Robin said, right, mental health, like we want our, Eve, you talked about how well Yaakov was doing, right? Like all we want is what's best for our children, and the ways in which not using this language doesn't stop our kids from knowing that these are their identities. All it does is tell them that they're somehow weird or different, or it's not safe to talk to us. And so even seeing, so I mentioned, so my son was 7 when he transitioned. He's the oldest of 3 kids. I have each of my kids is basically 2 years apart, and it was like so funny watching my youngest son growing up. Where not often, but I remember distinctly at least one time. I don't even remember what the conversation was, but he must have been like 4, and he suddenly like stopped, and he was like, "Am I still?" Yep, checking in, like confirm that. It's just like thought that that was a thing he should check. I love that he just kind of knew that like he shouldn't take anything in his life for granted, and that it was okay to just kind of like know who he was. The same way, I mean, Yaakov, you say sort of joking about coming out as straight, right? But like also, like, why do we assume people are straight? Like also people have to discover that. And the idea that you can give people space to discover and know themselves is actually something that's so beautiful and expansive, and not something that we should be afraid of.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robin. And then we're gonna move on to our next
Okay, all I was going to say
segment.
quickly was I didn't mean to minimize, I guess, the coming out experience, especially for my son. What it gave me, I think, and probably him as well, the freedom and the feeling to do was I was ready to be like an advocate and then some. But I wanted to wait until it was on his terms, right? So until he kind of was making that as a part of him, it wasn't something that I was going to be as loud about as I might be right now in terms of supporting the community and making it clear and bringing it up in conversations at Shabbos tables or with friends, because I'm so worried about the entire community's mental health around this that I find it important to do, which I then kind of had the ability to do with a little more clout.
Awesome. Thanks, Robin. All right, so let's focus in on the experience in schools themselves. So what were interactions with folks who worked in the school, including teachers, administrators, other staff at your schools, whether you're a parent, whether you're one of our LGBTQ people who are students, any and all of those. Obviously, everyone on the panel can't speak about every single interaction, but I'll leave it to you to pick which was the most important. Eve, can you didn't give me any nonverbals that you're ready to speak, but you haven't spoken as much.
I kind of want to let Yakov go first because he started the dialogue first, and I jumped in later, and I'd like to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yakov, you're muted. All right, now you're unmuted. Good. Excellent.
Okay. I said before that I couldn't go into all details. Here I really can't go into all details. There's so much. But so I started working with administration actually way before I came out. I didn't even I just came to them as an advocate for the queer community in the school. And there were a few small things that I wanted to accomplish. We wanted a club, but we knew that wasn't going to happen. It was just sort of, we were like, let's, at least try. And it didn't go anywhere, but we tried our best. And I wanted to put like a safe place sign on the guidance counselor office. That didn't work either, but we tried. But then slowly I started realizing, okay, I'm going to need to actually talk about myself now. There are things that I need. And the main thing the things that I requested were I asked to be called by my new name and pronouns, and for that to be changed on the roster and my email and all those things. And I asked to wear the boys' uniform because I'm a boy. And another one was I asked to be able to wear tefillin because that's very important to me. I am very deeply religious and I cared about that a lot. So after about a year of fighting, this is incredible. I did manage to get permission to wear tefillin. This was actually before I came out publicly, but the administration knew that I was trans. And the rule was that I couldn't be seen by anyone. They tried to say oh no, we're gonna let you come late to school and you can do it at home. I was like, I can't do that because I come on the bus, and I was like, it just wasn't reasonable. So I ended up putting it on in a closet, which I just love that because it's so symbolic of what was happening. So I was allowed to be myself in a literal closet. One time I was seen and that did not go well. It spread around and people reported me, which is very surprising. I finally, like I said before, I came out right before my senior year. The main reason I came out, at that time specifically, I said before, like I wanted to be able to be on my own terms, and I knew it had to happen soon. I knew it had to happen soon because I needed to cut my hair. And, my hair was long. I needed to cut it short. That was so important for my mental health. And I couldn't pass, right, in public as a man with long hair. And so I needed to cut it. And I realized, like, I can't just go back and forth between having it short and long. So I eventually came out again with administration, and I asked them for the requests that I mentioned to be able to, you know, be called by my name pronouns, to be like registered as a boy in the school system and be able to wear the boys' uniform. They agreed to call me by my name. They did not agree to the uniform. And that's when I was like, okay, things are not going to work out. So that was the main thing that we fought with them for the next year, was about the uniform, because they wanted me to wear a skirt. I could not wear a skirt. That wasn't a possibility for me. For me, being trans means that I have gender dysphoria, right? That means that being a girl and things that I associate with that are painful for me. They're detrimental to my mental health. And so that caused many issues. We tried to work with it. I tried to, they agreed to let me wear pants underneath the skirt, which doesn't really do much. And that caused way too many issues for me. I think we're gonna have more time to talk about that later, but I also just want to talk about the response from my peers. So my friends already knew. I'm not like a big social person. I have like my group of friends. They knew, I knew I could trust them. That wasn't an issue. When I came out to my grade, I sent a text to the entire grade. There was a grade chat, and there was a girls' grade chat and a boys' grade chat. So I was on the grade chat and the girls' grade chat. So I texted the girls' chat first, and I ended it by saying, like, I'm gonna be leaving this chat soon because I'm not a girl, right? And I explained everything in the text. Um, and I only got positive responses from that. Some people replied to me privately. Other than that, there wasn't really much. I left that and then I went to the grade chat. I didn't really get much there either. To be honest, I didn't really get much of anything. Most people just kind of ignored me. The biggest thing that happened is there were some people that stopped talking to me. They would like avoid making eye contact with me, things like that. I had a lot of people staring. I knew people were talking behind my back. I had
What was that like for you, Yaakov? How did
um
that impact you?
it well, it's a very strange experience to have people, to suddenly be in the spotlight. But it's especially strange to have that happen because you come out. Because when you come out, you get so much strength. And so the moment I came out and started to be myself, I got so much strength that I never had before. And I also faced challenges that I had never faced before. So I wouldn't go back. I much prefer the strength I have now than to before I came out. But the challenges were very difficult. Um, I couldn't go through a normal day without realizing that I stood out. Um, Again, no one would say anything directly to my face, except for like a few exceptions. For the most part, people didn't really say anything to my face. But then my friends would tell me like, "Hey, I just heard people saying this thing about you. I heard someone calling you a slur." And then after a couple months, I started realizing it was getting out of the school. So people would be like, "Oh yeah, I was at a Shabbos lunch and they were talking about you, and they didn't actually know your name, but you know." And yeah, I started realizing how big it was getting because apparently being a trans Jew is an anomaly for some people and they find it very fascinating. The biggest reaction that I had was just people asking me, but like, how is that possible? Like, they're like genuinely confused, like, but how are you still Jewish? Or like, but how does that make sense? Um, my favorite conversation that I had someone, this was the most confrontational. He came up to me. He clearly wanted to like get me riled up. He had a whole bunch of friends and everything. And I had a plan for that. I told the administration the plan ahead of time. Also, I told them if anyone approaches me, I'm going to be so relaxed and so happy to talk to them that they're going to get weirded out and they're going to leave. And it worked. I answered every single one of his questions, and he was so confused. In the middle of it, he suddenly stops and goes, wait, you're actually answering my questions. I said, that's correct. I am. And it hadn't computed to him that I wasn't being trans just to annoy people, and that maybe I didn't want to just cause a fight, because he seemed to like, he was like, oh yeah, you're gonna want to, you're gonna fight me and stuff. Um, but the thing that he said that made me feel so, I guess it actually made me feel so reassured. It was so stupid. And I was like, okay, if this is what people think about me, I'm okay with that. He kept asking me, but how is that possible? Like how are you allowed to do that if you're so Jewish? And I told him, well, there's this halacha, and I talked to this rabbi and this and that. And he wasn't convinced, and he said, I just don't think a rabbi would say that. And I said, okay, well, there are some concerns. What are your concerns? What are your specific questions? And he goes, oh, I don't know. I don't know Torah. I'm just assuming. And I went, okay, I do. I did the research. Do you have anything you specifically want to talk to me about? And he walked away, right? And I guess that was a moment I was like, okay, if anyone really thinks that about me, it doesn't have substance. It's not real. I know who I am. I know what I'm doing. And so things got much more dramatic when I left school, which is a whole nother story. But now I know people talk about me way more because it's just a more dramatic story and it's more interesting to them, I guess. And I started just been using that same mindset. Like, they don't know my story. They don't, it was like, oh, I don't know, Tori. They don't know my story. They don't know what's happening. They don't know anything about me. So why should I be afraid of them? You know?
Excellent. Thanks, Yaakov. Ben, can you talk about your experience?
I'd be happy to. To all the, I guess, administrators on the call tonight or in the future, I want to say that you certainly set the tone in how the school embraces or doesn't embrace queer people or your queer students. But at the end of the day, in like little interactions, it's the teachers that really make the difference. I went to an elementary school which I guess could be considered pretty centrist Orthodox, and I had teachers that either ignored the topic or called the people confused. I had a teacher that said, Yamach Shemo the gays verbatim. And then when I went to a high school that had a different hashkafa, when something homophobic, transphobic was said, a teacher would be like, "Hey, stop that. That's not cool." And those were really the signs that I got that really, told me about the vibe of the school more so than, anything that an administrator could say. That really let me know that the high school that I went to was an okay place to come out. So I guess to the administrators on the call, I think that really, informing your teachers, doing trainings with your teachers is the most effective way to communicate to your students that your school is a safe place, because at the end of the day, most students aren't interacting with the administration on a daily basis. They're interacting with the teachers who are, really instilling the values of the school.
Thanks, Ben. Eve, you had something to say.
Yeah, and we're condensing a lot of story into a short amount of time, but I'm I'm going to take that on. I was so proud of Yaakov's independence through all of high school. I really did not get involved with anything at school if I could avoid it. I kept as much distance as possible because I could see he was coming into himself and was really owning everything about his high school career, but especially this part. Nevertheless, I knew he was having these conversations with the administration, and that he was being very well received and very well respected in their exchanges back and forth. So at one point I emailed, and the person who emailed me back said, "Your child is a Tselem Elohim." So I was like, wow, they love my kid. Like, I really felt, to this day, I feel how much they like him, appreciate him, admire so many things. But things got super hairy around the uniform, as Yaakov was talking about. And the way that, I'm not quoting anybody, but this is how I would sort of describe the experience. It feels as though the school is like, "We love you. We want you here. You're welcome here under all circumstances, but you've got to wear the skirt," which to us means you're asking me to come in on fire. Like, you want me to light myself on fire before I walk in the door, and you say that I'm welcome, even though you won't allow me to come in any other way. There was a way in which it was impossible for them to see our reality. And I do respect and sort of bow to that, but also I find it incredibly frustrating because, again, as a mom watching this process, if I was a non-believer in what it meant to be trans, I now understand it completely because I've seen a complete personality change in my child, a child who was incredibly shy, incredibly reserved, and you see in front of you that that's not who's sitting here before you today. So I know that there's a truth to who Yaakov is now. Um, um, and I had a lot of, there was a lot when things started to get ugly, and eventually what was decided is that it would be better off for Yaakov to finish the year remotely, which has been an extremely painful decision in so incredibly many ways, to be separated from the Jewish community with all the normal ways, but also with all the things happening in Israel, to not be able to be part of that has been really a shock. Um, and I've continued dialogue with the school, which has had ups and downs. There were times where we were fighting with each other. There were times when I was just pleading with them to see the world that I could see. And now we're closing things out, and they've been able to say, "We're so sorry that we couldn't do better. We really know we didn't do well enough." And also, you're right, we can't see what you see. It's a very strange mix. And I keep sort of wondering, I wonder what would have happened if we had had more dialogue sooner. I wonder if there was a way we could have understood sooner that this was a line that we could never cross. They were never going to be able to see things the way we saw, and that they were never going to change this rule. And I don't know if we would have known that we can't live with that rule. Had we known earlier, we might have chosen a different outcome, transferred or something like that. We never wanted to. So I don't know. These are what ifs. But more dialogue sooner, I think, could have helped considerably. And having it, and more often when we weren't fighting, but the meetings when it felt like we really do both. There were times when it felt like we were on opposite teams, and there were times when it felt when we were on the same team. And when we could be on the same team but wrestling with a problem, then I could go home and sleep at night. It was the other times that I couldn't go home and sleep at night.
Thank you so much, Eve. It's a lot of painful things in there, very much so. Robin or Rabbi Rory, interactions with schools? What were your experiences like? Any
Sure. I mean,
challenges involved?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, the high school where my son went couldn't have been a better place for him. Very lucky to be at a place that had a gay straight alliance, where I think that says very loud and clearly to the entire school, we're here for you, we support you, you're welcome here. But I know that my son shared one specific story with me, and he said that he had on his computer, the kids put all kinds of stickers on their computers, and he had one on his that said LGBTQ safe zone, which I haven't seen lately, but there was like years ago, we had a bunch of them. And I think it's a really important sticker. And one of his rabbis actually asked him, hey, do you have any more of those? Because I would love to get one and put it on my computer. So that was very telling, as opposed to I've had kids in lots of schools in the areas in which I live. And I've heard a lot about other schools, more like you were saying, Ben, like when the teachers don't say anything or they allow the homophobic comments. Yes, like literally just not addressing it at all, not saying anything, or potentially even worse, making a homophobic or a negative comment themselves. And that tells the kids, like, I can't say anything here. Like, I can't say anything. I'm not wanted. And that's kind of what they hear. And the kids hear it too. And the kids kind of feed off of that. I mean, I had a kid recently. I'm also a social worker in some of the schools. A kid was like, no, we don't have any gay kids here because this is an Orthodox school. And I know one of my kids in one of the other schools said they thought it was so important if even just the teachers could be told, I'm telling you, just statistically, you have at least one LGBTQ child in this class, and you need to teach and speak knowing that every single day that you come into this classroom, because it is impacting someone, whether they do or don't come out, or whether they do or don't come out during these years. This is a fact. And I think that even my child's siblings would appreciate that if the teachers would they don't always want to have to be the advocate and the person that stands up for their brother, and to have a teacher, someone that they respect, that's above them, to say, like, enough is enough. It would stop them if they said other terrible comments about different types of populations, but for some reason that population didn't seem to be as addressed, and many teachers just kind of like ignore it.
Wow. So what I'm hearing from you actually is this, it's not only about the interactions that the queer student or the queer student's family has with the school, and separately the interactions the queer family and queer student has with their peers, but they actually interact, that the teachers and administrators set the tone and create the environment in which those peer relationships form and develop, and it kind of creates or informs the environment, the social environment, not just the academic environment. Rabbi Rory.
Having a lot of feelings listening to what everybody is sharing, and there's so much pain and so much emotion. We made the decision. My kids have been in day school their entire lives, but they're in community day school. They're not in Orthodox day school. And in part because my son was so young, and the idea of having him in a place where we didn't have total confidence that he was going to be protected and that the school would have his back was something that was really hard when he was 7 and 8. And we started this journey originally in the Midwest. I'm now in on the East Coast, but we started it in the Midwest, where we were not only having to deal with the school, but also fight legislation in the state. And so I feel grateful because we ended up in a school that was really able to support him. And I feel like in some ways, what everyone's saying are the opportunities are actually what we saw. So I mentioned that he came out to his teacher and his teacher really supported him in the process, not even knowing that that was the process that he was on. The school reached out to us between first and second grade to check with us in advance if we wanted a new name and new pronouns to go onto all the files. We didn't have to ask for any of that. We had 2 incidents at the beginning of second grade, one in which we had one kid who was dead naming our child, and we went to the administration, and the administration said, we already know and we are on it, and they shut it down real fast. And the second was that the administration came to us actually and said, oh, your son wants to use the boys' bathroom, but this is why we have a gender neutral bathroom, and we think that's what he should use. And we went in for a meeting. My husband came in with all this research of like, here's what all of the best medical and psychiatric, and I don't even know, kind of says about people using restrooms according to their gender. And the school, I remember it was right after Yom Kippur. The school invited us in for a meeting and we were geared up for a fight. And the head of school said, I need to apologize to you. We got this wrong. We're asking you to give us a month. We don't want this to be a policy for your child. We want this to be a school-wide policy. Let us work it through the board. And they did. And within a month, they had changed the school's policy on it. And so my child was really embraced throughout. And I will even say in the last year, this year was the year we moved, last year or 2 years ago, the school actually set up a policy, and we cried when the head of school called us because they called to say we had been spending so much time in the state capitol fighting against anti-trans bills. And the school administration said that they had just had a meeting and they decided that anytime an anti-trans bill came up, a member of the administration would also go to testify. And that was huge, not only just in terms of what it meant to have him supported, but also literally when we were there, having another friendly face and somebody that he knew. So we had a few hiccups, but in a school that wanted to understand what was going on, that wanted to be supportive, that recognized where they might have some missteps, and that at the end of the day prioritized my child's safety and well-being.
Awesome. Thanks, Rabbi Rory. A few of you mentioned advocacy and fighting for your needs or your child's needs. Those can be sometimes easy interactions, potentially, depending on who you're talking to. What are the various ways in which, how did that go for you? Both maybe ways in which it was successful, or what were some parts where it was really hard?
Happy to jump in here.
Go for it.
And start off. So like I said, I mean, I felt lucky we didn't have to do as much advocacy in the school, although we still did do some of that. But we went up against the state many times. And the first time that my son ever testified before the state Senate, he was 8 years old. He started testifying. He's gone before the state house and the state Senate numerous times. And in a way that both I think was really empowering, like he was really proud of this being something that he was able to do, but also meant sitting there while we listened to some of the most heinous things that people could say. And now not just coming, I mean, I think it's terrible when it comes from teachers and the people you know and the people that you live with in community. It's also really terrifying when you hear it from people who are then deciding laws that impact your fate. And hearing things like people transition because they don't connect to the parent of the gender that they were assigned at birth, which really meant so, right? So like having a trans son means that I wasn't a good mother, or I wasn't a feminine role model, things like that. I've been accused of having Munchausen's by proxy because I just want attention for my child, which is its own endless cycle, because then anytime I speak out for my child, I might just be trying to get more attention, like I am right here. He was largely spared because he was younger. Teens who would testify would often get asked really invasive questions, like about their genitals and about what surgeries they'd had, right? These public questions, and he would be, and so he'd be sitting in the room and he'd be seeing all of that. And I feel like our life was really this roller coaster of like the highest highs and the lowest lows, because we would really work to balance. And we're lucky we had enough friends around us that it was like he would hear these really heinous things. And then we would make sure that it would like, like he would know that those people were just being ridiculous. That wasn't the world that he lived in. But at some point he realized, and we did have to make the decision that where we lived wasn't a safe place. For as much as we had a supportive school, we didn't live in a supportive state, and it wasn't safe. We lost healthcare in our state. We had to travel 5 hours just to get to the next medical care provider who would do gender affirming care for us. It was no longer sustainable, and that was devastating to all of my children when they realized, and knowing. I mean, I remember the time where they said, "Are we going to have to leave?" And we said, "Maybe," and all of our kids just burst into tears. And we said, "We need you to trust us that if we say we have to go, it's because we have to go." And that was one of the hardest decisions that we ever had to make. And also knowing that we were giving up, right? That we had to sort of relinquish, that this was a fight that we were able to hold it off for 4 years. We went and we traveled and we testified, and we were able to stop the laws, and then we lost, and the laws passed, and we lost what we needed. And we had to leave everybody that we knew and loved behind, and the fight behind, and the allies behind, and all of those things behind. So it's I think my son would say that he really sees himself as a vocal advocate, and he's proud of what he's been able to do. And I love that he learned some of that. And I hate that he had to learn some of that. And I hate that part of his life is knowing that he had people around him who loved him, but that the people in the highest positions of power that he accessed were people who were actively working to tell him that he was wrong and that he didn't matter, and that what he was living was somehow something that they saw as scary and needed to be quashed.
Thanks so much, Rabbi Rory. Yaakov.
Yeah, that's a lot. And there are a few things I want to say in response to that. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to try to do my best. Um, the first thing I want to say, this is kind of a strange response to asking about advocacy, but something that I learned is that like when to step down, because there were points when I'd realize, okay, this fight isn't going anywhere. I need to take care of myself, or I need to take care of my friends in ways that maybe I can't fight the person in power right now, as important as that is. If I can't do that, I need to, make sure I'm protecting myself and my community in other ways. So I think that's really important. I have not been on that level of advocacy. I, haven't been talking to politicians. I actually coincidentally happened to be in the House of Representatives while they were talking about those issues, but I wasn't out, which was a very, very strange experience for me. Um, and I was with my school also. It was very odd. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the, I guess, the red flags with the people that I was talking to, because we sort of, I feel like, laid out the general story and the foundation, which was they genuinely did care about me. I don't feel that those people that I was talking to had, hated me or were transphobic or anything like that, but they weren't willing to help us. And there were a few things that were particularly frustrating. So the one of the biggest things was just I didn't we had to put in so much effort, so much energy. It takes a lot of energy to advocate for yourself, and that wasn't being reciprocated. I would be told, "We want to talk to you, right? Like, come to this meeting," and then I'd show up and they wouldn't be there, and I'd be waiting for hours, missing classes, and I wouldn't actually get a meeting. Or, we would send emails and they wouldn't be, like, no one would respond to them, and things like that. Um, which was very frustrating because at a certain point it felt like we were being lied to. Excuse me. Felt like we were being lied to because we kept being told, "We want to talk to you, we want to meet with you, we want open communication." And there would even be points, like I mentioned before, wearing a skirt was very painful for me. And there'd be points during the day when I would just give up and I'd take it off. And then later they'd call me into a meeting and they'd say, "We're trying to work with you. Like, but you're not working with us." And I'm like, "You're not working with me. I'm telling you what I need. I'm showing you my like medical records, and I'm showing you this evidence and that evidence. And you're, first of all, telling me," they told me from the beginning, "We won't look at those things no matter what." And and they kept dismissing the concerns I was bringing up. And then even when they would tell me they want to meet, it wouldn't happen. Which at a certain point just felt like they were trying to make themselves feel better. Like they're trying to make themselves better by saying we're going to meet, and then they wouldn't actually put in the effort to do it. They would
So
promise
the
things.
only time they could get you to, the only time you could get them to meet was when you just took care of your own needs, and then they're like, okay, well now we have time to
Yeah.
meet.
Mm-hmm.
That's
That's right. And
that's pretty upsetting.
I really
I do want to move on. I do want to move on to your mom to
I
hear
make
what.
one small
Okay, fine. One more
I was
small
gonna
thing. You
say
got it.
the thing that I found particularly frustrating is that I'm a high schooler, right? I'm 18 now, so technically an adult, but I'm a high schooler, and I had to be on the level of an adult as even more so. You were talking about your son who was advocating for himself when he was 8. I had to be an adult, but I didn't feel like I was talking to adults. The people I was talking to felt very immature, very childish. Were not even managing to make their own appointments. And I can go on and on about that, but I'm not going to, so I'll pass
Mm.
it on.
Yeah, it sounds like they were kind of avoiding the topic, which was not fair to you because they're the ones in power, right? They're the adults. I mean, okay, you're technically an adult, but they were the adults and they were like avoiding the high schooler. And that was something to think about. Eve. And then we're gonna and then I'll call on someone. Go for it.
Yaakov covered a lot of what I was thinking, but I just want to sort of add a little bit to it, which is anytime I've talked with friends about our situation, they tend to go one way or the other, like either they're furious with the school and don't understand why they couldn't possibly see it another way, or they're from a more like, well, what did you expect? It's an Orthodox Jewish day school. And I've always really, really tried so hard and taken pride in walking on a tightrope between those and trying to bring that to the conversations that I had with the school. I always tried my best to listen well, to assume the best, to give the benefit of a doubt. And when an email didn't get responded to, that would fray, and I would start to panic, especially recently a number of weeks went by with I might get a response, but it wasn't the response to the question I asked. And it enough time passed that I was going into a panic where I was checking my email every like maybe 30 seconds. And like I was so tense that when we finally did have a conversation and it was a civil conversation, I was like, I didn't even know what it felt like to not be tense and angry and afraid anymore. Um, Even an email that said, this is a really tough topic, we're talking about it, we'll get back to you next Wednesday, would have been enough that I could have relaxed my shoulders a little bit. So I want to just say here publicly that I acknowledge that these are tricky issues. Schools has a lot of different people, different voices. They're trying to figure stuff out. Maybe they're trying their best. But if you don't respond quickly, the amount of toll that takes on the people waiting at home is exponential. So that's what I have to say about that.
I appreciate that. The amount of weight, we're talking about going to school. School is supposed to be hard just growing up, right? Like friends and drama and not being great at sports, unless you're great at sports, and then I don't know, whatever it is. Growing up is hard, and being in school is tough. And to have all these, Eve, that you're kind of like waiting for something to happen to Yaakov or hearing some bad news, and you can't even get an email back, or Yaakov, you're like trying to chase administrators. It just sounds like so much more weight um, for just trying to grow up, which has its own weight. Um, let's go to Robin quickly, and then Ben, and then we're gonna go to some announcements before coming back to Q&A.
Okay, just to pick up where I think Eve kind of left off about the tightrope between these are Orthodox day schools, or at least the ones that some of us are talking about. It's something I really try to respect and keep in mind. With that said, I have younger children who would be greatly impacted by what I would or would not potentially do in any of these schools. Forget the fact that they're teenagers who might be embarrassed by whatever a parent I do as a parent, because I'm a parent, right? So that's embarrassing. But because of this, even in our areas, like, would my kid maybe not get in if I become a troublesome parent, or potentially for college or for SEMs and yeshivas and those kind of things. So I don't know how many other people that may impact, but I know that balancing all of that has been a juggle too, and I'm not really able to be authentically who I am or who I would want to be as an advocate, because I have to keep all of those things, take it all into account, and also just from everything I've learned from Eshel, trying to embrace change, at a certain pace. So those are other things that have greatly impacted my what I would call more quiet advocacy, and that is making sure I have a flag up outside and some little things like that that I think are quiet that my younger kids are like, take it all down. So I just think that's important for people to know that just because you don't see other people hanging it up out doesn't necessarily mean the parent isn't an advocate, but they're taking a lot of other things into account when they're doing this stuff.
Thanks, Robin. Ben, real quick before we go to announcements.
Sure. So my elementary school and middle school actually reached out to me after I came out, like 6, 8 months after I came out, saying, "Hi Ben, let's sit down and talk. You've been out of the school now for 3 years, and we'd love for you to reflect on the experiences that you've had." And I met with them, and we had a couple of conversations. Have things changed? I would assume probably not, realistically. But I did the work, and there's really not much else I could do. A week after I graduated high school, I emailed the English department at my high school, which I found I felt a lot more open in, and I was like, thank you for an incredible 4 years. If I can make one suggestion, it would be to include queer main characters in the English syllabus. 4 years without having a queer main character, to analyze the queer experience as a class. My high school is very proud of their queer community, and that's awesome. And the English chair actually really responded to that, and we had a great conversation. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. It's nice to hear also some successes amidst all those challenges. All right, so we're now going to take our pre-announced pause for announcements. So what the panelists and myself will return in just a moment. We're now going to hear from Dr. Sunny Epstein and Miriam Kabakov from Eshel.
Welcome, everybody. It's so great to be here together with over 100 of students, parents, educators, all of you who are here who really care about LGBTQ students in Orthodox places. All of you here are not alone in advocating for LGBTQ students in Orthodox day schools. We are here to help you. My name is Miriam Kabakov, and I'm the executive director and one of the founders of Eshel. Our mission is to build LGBTQ inclusive Orthodox Jewish communities. And we want individuals like Yaakov and Ben and Rabbi Rory and Robin's children and their families to be able to participate fully in the Orthodox community of their choice. And that is what we do. So I'm going to quickly just give you a few resources right now so you have some takeaways. For educators, please ask me about the Make Space for Difference project. It's a sticker and resource guide to get the message across that you are an ally and a person students can trust. It is kind of subtle. So in your Orthodox day school, you most likely will be able to post this, put it up on your wall and in your door, on your computer, so that students will see it and know that they can come to you. For parents, we just came back from an incredible weekend at our parent retreat. It is an annual event, but between our annual parent retreat, we have many programs, many groups, weekly drop-in groups for parents who are trying to figure out how to parent their children in Orthodox spaces. We also have a separate parent group for parents of trans kids. And we're here to help you find a community. Nobody should be parenting alone, and nobody should parent an LGBTQ child in Orthodoxy alone. 3, for teens, please reach out to Jeremy at JQY. JQY is an incredible resource and life-saving. 4, there's a new-ish film called Unspoken that really demonstrates the experience of a student in a yeshiva high school. And it's a great depiction of being LGBTQ and closeted in day schools. So I highly recommend it. I'm going to put a few of these links in the chat, and I'm going to let Sunny take it over.
Thank you, Miriam, and thank you, panelists, and Jeremy and David. This program was 2 years in the making. We had some false starts. We had some difficulty putting it together. And then, of course, October 7th and other things came up. And I'm just so glad that we're all here tonight. I want to make it clear that this is not an event. It is part of a process. And in this process, there are parallel things happening. It is a particular challenge to get our Orthodox schools to get on board, to indicate or to amplify Rabbi Rory's statement. We're finding that our Orthodox schools are often not equipped to deal with our LGBT students, and that some where we have choices, our community schools may be better at that. With that being said, we're on a trajectory. I always say it's kind of like we're flying on a plane while it's being constructed. Now, that's not helping Yaakov right now. And Ben, whatever it was when he was there, it was. Hopefully, as Rory's student goes through, it will be a little better. But as time goes on, there will be lessons learned. And you parents and kids who are watching this, just like our panelists, are the ones that are going to teach, are the ones that are going to lead the way. And I want to reinforce what both Eve and Yaakov said, that have grace, be respectful, honor the place that you're in. You be the adult in the room, just like Yaakov was saying, even if those around you are not. All of these panelists have taken chances because this is a public program and this will go out there. Notice that no names of schools were given. Notice that people made I statements, our experiences. We are here to work with schools, hopefully to make these schools our partners, because our children want to stay in our schools. Our children want to live a full, meaningful, community-based Jewish life. And chaval, if we are sending these students away, think of what they can contribute to our communities. Think about the lessons that the rest of the students can learn from them in terms of their dedication to Judaism and to a Jewish way of life. I do want to honor those schools and those educators who are trying to address these issues and trying to provide a safe space. I myself spent many, many years in Jewish day schools, and every student in the school knew that they could come to me. In fact, I had kids that came to me and practiced coming out to their parents and to other teachers. Be that safe space, be that safe harbor if you can, educators who are watching. It doesn't take much, and you're literally saving lives. We honor you. We want to be clear that we do not want anyone to compromise the ethos of their school, the Jewish space, the Orthodox bent that your school takes. That is not what we're doing. What we're doing is saying, when kids like Yaakov or Ben want so much to be in your schools, trust me, you want them there. How do we figure that out? We would like to bring this program to your faculty, to your parents, to your students. Please contact me. I will put my email in the chat. And we are going to be able to run this program for our schools, for faculties, and I or someone else will be available for Q&A when we show the recordings. I want to thank everybody who's here. I want to thank Parat. David Schwartz has been an amazing, amazing ally. And Michael Gordon from Parat also. And Avi, thank you so much. Parents, students, thank you. And please stay in touch with us at Eshel and also at Parat. Jeremy, I'm turning it back to you.
Thanks, Sunny. Thanks, Miriam. And we're going to bring me and all of our panelists back for our longly anticipated Q&A. All right. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to focus on two things for, well, let's see how quickly we go because we got about 10 minutes. So for parents, and then we'll do the mirror version of it for our student and alum, which is how do you see your child's place in the Jewish community as they grow up? Do you see them on the bima, on shul boards, respected in the community? Do you worry about them stepping away from orthodoxy? So if you're a parent, you can answer that question. And if you're not a parent, then you can answer it for yourself. Looking to see who's eager to start.
I'm happy to be eager.
Go for
Yes to all of it. I have a child who loves Judaism and loves his Jewish community, and just laned last week at shul because it was the anniversary of his bar mitzvah portion, and is practicing the Haftorah for his sister's bat mitzvah that's coming up in 2 weeks, which is terrifying to me right now. Like this. And yes, also I'm terrified. My family made decisions that not going to Orthodox day school was safer for our child, and that also means that they're not growing up immersed. I mean, we go to an Orthodox shul, but they're not immersed in Orthodox day school, and maybe that's a good thing sometimes, because I think some of the stories that we hear could also really turn them off. But I don't know what choice they're going to make later in life, and I think that's maybe true of every parent, that we don't know where our kids are going to go early on. But I absolutely question the choices that I've made in terms of what that means for my child's Jewish identity. And I know that right now they have been surrounded by a Jewish community that loves them, and I can't think of anything more important Jewishly to give them.
Thanks for that, Rory. Yes, Eve.
Yeah, I feel so incredibly lucky that I have such a tenacious child that loves being Jewish and insists on keeping that going regardless. I could see and I know many families where the kids have been pushed away, and I know how desperate the Jewish community is to keep our kids from. So this is a no-brainer to me. Like, we need to make things as welcoming and easy as possible so that we don't push them away. I sometimes am starting to be like, wow, like I'm getting really tired of hanging out with my communities, which makes Eshel, again, I'm another plug there, just being around other Orthodox parents makes me feel like, okay, I can still do both of these things.
Thanks, Eve. Ben?
Sure. I don't think Yaakov and I are going anywhere. I think we're going to be sticking around the Orthodox community for a while. So everyone better get used to us. I personally, I see myself being as involved as possible the rest of my life. I love Hashem. I love Torah. Um, yeah. I'd say that, Eve, that's a great point that you make. If I could just add in one more thing, I think that Robin said something about statistically like 25, 30 students in a class is going to be queer. I'd actually up that number because, including the siblings of the queer child who deeply care about their sibling, and the cousins, and you've added a lot of people who really do care about this issue, and want the best and want a safe Orthodox space for the people that they love, and the people that they are. So I think sometimes teachers say like, oh, it's 1 in 100, and they're confused. But it's sure it's one in something, but it's also the siblings that care, that can be turned away from Orthodoxy, which is terrible. Shouldn't happen, of course.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben. That's actually something I talk about when I do JQY trainings. It's like always talk as if there's somebody queer or their family members in the room, because that's probably what it is. Yaakov, you had a big smile when Ben said we're not going anywhere. So
I
can you
mean, he's
briefly
right.
explain your smile?
He's absolutely right. I never intended to leave. I think it honestly never even occurred to me when I started transitioning that would be what people thought. It's so strange. But I will say that of course, like we all go through religious journeys. I have changed in some ways. But I haven't in any way gotten less religious. I've just had to rethink some of what I have to do in my everyday life and how I explain myself and things like that. But and then it's changed my career also because it's just made me want to advocate for my community more. I want to show that we exist, you know, the religious queer community. And it's really just the biggest difference is the external difference. It's just that suddenly I have to prove my Judaism, even though I didn't have to before. The Judaism hasn't changed. My, you know, my religious identity and what I do in my life and, you know, how I relate to Hashem and all that hasn't changed. It's just about how I talk to people about it. It's about, you know, how much I have to prove it to people. I now try to dress more Jewish so people don't doubt it. You know, strange things like that. Which is something that you don't really think about. But yeah, I mean, your sexuality or gender identity doesn't have anything to do with it's yeah, no, it's I'm not going anywhere. He's absolutely right. So
All right. Well, then we'll have to have a reunion panel in like 15 years of we're not going anywhere and we didn't go anywhere. Robin, let's come to you before we have our last question.
Yeah, my son is not going anywhere either. So it's definitely it's in his neshama through and through. I don't think, like Yaakov said, it was ever, it was ever discussion to him like that he wouldn't stay between camp and school and the communities. With that said, as he's getting older, he's almost 22, he is starting to worry like, uh-oh, I know there are some accepting shuls here and there and communities here and there, but like how accepting, right? Like accepting like some of these schools where they're like, no, we love you, we embrace you, you're the best, but just, just stay, quiet and he wants someone who's going to really love him and his family and community. So he wants to stay in it. And I'm hoping that there will always be a space for him too, with, inspirations like Ben and Yaakov. I do think that these kids and that generation are going to make those spaces.
Thanks so much. So we're hearing a lot of we're not going anywhere. I just want to give voice to there's lots of people who do go somewhere and can stay with some of the experiences we've talked about. Um, so so it's just something I would like everybody in attendance to remember. And we're gonna do our final question now, final Jeopardy, which is what's one thing that you think that you would like schools to have done or do um, differently that would have improved your experience as a parent, your child's experience, or your experience if you're Yaakov or Ben?
can I respond?
Go for it.
So this is actually something that I wanted to touch on before that I didn't get to, which is the best part of my experience was the people that I was interacting with in class, you know, like my teachers, my peers. A lot of them were amazing people. The strange part about it is that they weren't allowed to be as supportive as they were, right? I would have teachers say, you know, by the way, I support you, but like I don't really want, like I can't really do that publicly or things like that. Um, and I think there's definitely a lot of education that needs to be done. I had a lot of teachers be kind of confused or uncomfortable, and I would talk to them, and they'd be like, "Oh, I totally support you," like, you know. But they weren't allowed to, and which is kind of a strange thing because no one's really controlling them. But they would say, "Oh, I would totally change this if I could," or "I would totally teach this in my class if I was allowed to." And meanwhile, the administrations would say, "Oh, but we're scared that the teachers will be uncomfortable with that." And I'm like, "No, no, no, they're the ones that want to do this stuff." And so I think really just like institutions letting like finding that because I think a lot of institutions they're like, okay, we see that you want this and we see that that's a good thing, but they're constantly afraid of pushback. But then there are also so many people that actually want to give that support, that they want to create that environment. So let them do that, right? Let them put a pride flag on their laptop. Every time I see that, I'm like, oh, I know I can trust you. I know you're safe, right? Um, Let teachers, like I had one teacher start censoring topics in class. Even I loved this teacher, but she started censoring them because she knew there was a particular student that would bring up problems, right? So like I I think there's something already there that's so strong, and I just wish it could be unleashed and empowered by institutions.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Eve, go for it.
Very quickly, learn more about this in the same way you would learn about a learning disability or about other kinds of differences in families, like a divorce or something like that, that learn more about it as if it's not some kind of trigger friendly thing. Learn more about it because there's so much more that we don't know yet, and that I think once we've figured out how to learn more about it, we'll understand how to bring the Torah to it better too.
Mm. Reminds me of the finger trap thing that you get, that the more you try to pull away, the tighter it gets. So the
Yeah.
more pain you do if you run away from this, if you actually just lean in, you might actually might just feel better. Who's next on something that can be done differently? Okay, I will pick randomly Robin.
Okay, sure. I think that like I'm just going to keep saying what they're saying. I do think training is so necessary because, like I said, that even some of the experiences where these teachers think that it doesn't impact them. This is an Orthodox day school, or there's no one in this class, and it's kind of like just even being told that they're like, wait, what? Um, just giving them one or two sentences of a script or something to say if they hear a homophobic comment or something like that. I'm not asking them to go out and make whole policies and blah, 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 blah. But in the classroom, you hear something, this is what we can say. I would love something as simple as that to be like kind of initiated somewhere.
Awesome. Thanks. What about Rory?
I want people to know that this is an incredibly scary time for the queer community. There is so much that is putting the queer community at the center of a political debate that they're not even asking to be a part of in any way, shape, or form. And everyone doesn't have to be on the front lines of that fight, but even just stopping to ask people how they're doing, check in on kids, check in on the parents. Just that's another way to show support that doesn't have to end with your stance on a policy, to just show that you know what's going on and that you know this is a hard time and that you care.
Very powerful. Thanks so much. Ben?
Something small would be to put a safe space sticker like on a wall. Just like everyone here, we all notice when we're at a doctor's office or somewhere and we see a mezuzah, but we realize that no one else notices, but it means a huge deal to us because we're like, oh, there's a Jew here, someone who understands us. Most people don't actually recognize the safe space stickers unless you are queer or have a family member who's queer, and it really means a lot to the people that need it, and it means nothing to nobody else.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I also wanted to add, Yaakov, you mentioned something, which was kind of like transparency. Teachers are saying it's the administration saying it's the teachers, and it's like, well, can we all just have a conversation and sort this out, so we can kind of empower the folks who have the needs, and have some transparency about what's going on. So I think I was hearing that from you also. All right, it is 9:32. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, to Ben, to Eve, to Rabbi Rory, to Robin, and to Yaakov. Thank you all so, so much. And we're now going to go back. We're going to hand this over. We're going to exit. We're going to hand this back over to Rabbi Schwartz to wrap up our program for the evening.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. We are in the middle of the Omer, and so I'll take advantage of this as an opportunity to remind everybody to count Sphira. Last night we counted 35. And every day builds on the next. And I really feel like, especially, Jeremy, the question that you closed with enables each of us to sort of take away something so that hopefully if we make a change today and a change tomorrow, we'll make it a place where we can come back, and Ben and Yaakov in 15 years will be in the places that they noted that they'll be, leaders of the Jewish community. I want to thank Eshel, the IRF, JOFA, JQI, Uri Litzedek, YCT, Yeshiva Ma'arat for their co-sponsorship. I want to thank Jeremy for serving as our moderator, Ben, Yaakov, Eve, Robin, Rory, Sunny, and Miriam. You guys have been amazing partners. If you want to see more from Porat, if you can, please support us financially. We do all of these programs at no charge. You can do that at poratonline.org. That is also where you will be able to find a recording of this event, poratonline.org/events. As soon as we can get that up onto the website, we will do so. And in addition to the more than 100 that participated live. There were another roughly 200 people who wanted to participate and will be getting the recording. And of course, if you thought that this was a program that you would like your school's administrator to see, please be sure to share it with them when we share it with you as well. And so thanks to each and every one of you for attending, wishing you a wonderful evening. And again, every little bit we can build a better world for the Jewish community and make sure that we're really truly welcoming and inclusive of everyone.